In this video, let's see if we can make some charts for our dashboard. Certainly not the only way to display this data, but I'm going to offer a couple of things you might want to consider. I'm going to start out here to the right, pull over the year, pull over the sales, and then pull over the negative of every place that those sales dollars go. Some of those sales dollars go to cost of goods sold, copy. Some go to overhead, paste. Some go to depreciation, at least in an accounting sense. Some go to net interest expense. I'm going to just refer to that instead of breaking it down to expense and income, because I'm hoping to keep most of these positive over here. Some go to other non-operating expense or taxes or dividends, and then everything left goes to retained earnings down on the balance sheet. So if you'll think of it this way, now those, I'm going to get rid of that negative sign. If you'll think of it this way, it's a good way to visualize what happens to my sales dollars. If I bring in 551.6, how much of that is left over to retain in earnings on the balance sheet? And that's kind of what an income statement does. The other way we could look at that is if I start with all these pieces and add them up, they should add up to the total sales down here. So that's what our chart is going to do. It's going to show us a breakdown of that 551.6 into these different categories. Now also on my chart, I want to include some lines that show some important things like gross profit. So I'm going to pull that over and I'm going to make it bold. And sales is going to be the top line. I'll make it bold. You'll see why later. And then I want to copy and paste it to EBITDA, EBIT, earnings before taxes, and net income. Now I want to copy this over about 7 rows, do a Control R, and we have essentially the same data from our income statement, but generally it's positive and it's bolded where we have subtotals and it's not where we don't. If you'll watch this video 2 times, this will make so much sense the second time through because you'll see where we're headed. So the next thing I need to do is get my labels. So I'm just going to say equals sales, or I could just copy those over, but we'll do it this way. Now our interest income and our interest expense, we said we weren't going to use, so I'm going to delete those. And now I'm ready to start drawing a chart. I seem to have the most luck in Excel. There's so many ways to draw a chart, but if I'll select my X data, hold down Control, select my Y data, and then Insert or Alt-N, then choose, in this case, I'm going to choose this 2D area chart. Now, I don't want the areas to be compared to each other. I want them to stack on top of each other. And the way I describe the different components of the sales should all stack up to sales. However, we'll have to fix the subtotals because they don't stack with the others. Now, what I need to do is include not only the first line that I put on the chart, but also the other lines. If I click on the series, you notice I can't drag that blue box anywhere. But if I click up here on the white part, then I can drag that blue box down and I can add all these others very easily to the chart. I want to add a legend so we can see what they are. And then I'm going, oops, once you move that, it's really hard to get it to automatically resize. So I'm going to undo the movement of that. And this time I'm going to more carefully select the chart, move it up here, and then extend it so we can see a bit more. Now I'm going to go through 2 tedious processes to reorder and reformat the series of this chart. Okay. The first process is going to be to right-click on the chart, change the chart type, and make it a combo. Now, as I said before, some of these things are going to stack up and be components of sales. Other things are going to be subtotals. So if it's sales, which is on the top line, choose this line with markers, not the stacked line with markers, but the line with markers. And if it's a component of sales, choose your 2D area chart. And that's going to be our pattern going through. Gross profit is a subtotal. SG&A is a component, so we'll make it a stacked area chart. So think about these things. If it contributes to sales, make it the stacked area chart. If it's just a subtotal, then make it the line with markers. And we're going to come back and delete those two. And then also on retained earnings, leave that a component, a stacked area. It probably doesn't make sense at this point, but let's hit OK and see what happens. And what happens is we now have a chart with several stacked area portions, less cost of goods sold, SG&A, depreciation, net interest, other operating expenses too small to see, income tax provision, and dividends, along with retained earnings, show all the breakdown of where our sales dollars went. We also have these other lines that show what was our gross profit, our EBITDA, our EBIT, our EBT, and our net income. This is a great time to stop and think about what the different lines on an income statement means. Which ones of them are contributing to the total, which of them are subtotals. Now the only problem is our subtotals don't line up with the other things. So what I'm going to do is flip this thing around. If you don't want to show the lines on it, I think this is a nice way to show the things you must pay and the order in which you pay them, and then how much is left over at the top for things like retained earnings that go to the balance sheet or dividends that get paid to the investor, so forth. What I need to do is get these in the other order so that they line up with these lines. So the first thing I know is that COGS goes on top. So I could right-click, select the data, and then use these little arrows to rearrange. If I want COGS to go on top, I actually need to run it down to the bottom of the list to put it on the top of the graph. And then I could do SG&A right after it and run it down second to the bottom of the list. One too far, and so on. But another way I could rearrange these is if I know that the very bottom of the list has the lowest series number, and remember series shows what's the name of the series, what's the X data, that's this blue line, what's the Y data, I'm sorry, the X data was the purple line, the Y data was the blue line, and then this very last thing after the comment is the series. So an easy way to change the order of these series would be to change this line. So if I want retained earnings on the bottom, I'll make retained earnings, go find it. That's confusing because those are almost the same color. I will make retained earnings a 1, puts it on the bottom. And then if I want dividends next, I'll go find dividends, but their order is a 2. So if you prefer to use those little arrows on the last screen, that's fine, but this is another way to do it. So income taxes, where are our income taxes? That would be 3. Other. So I can't really select other other non-operating expenses. But if I have one series selected, I can hold down Control and use the up-down arrow to move around these things. And eventually, hopefully, I'll find other non-operating expenses. So I'll make that the 4th. Told you this would be tedious. And then I need net interest expense to be the 5th. And let's see if I have things in order now. So we're going from retained earnings to dividends, and I'm using my Control up-down arrow, to income tax, to other operating expense, to net interest. Oh, sales happens to be the 6th series, but since it's a different series, chart type doesn't matter. And then I get to depreciation, and then finally cost of goods sold. So I have these in the order that I want. Let me widen this out and show a little better what our order is right now. So the cost of goods sold, SG&A, we're basically back in the order of the income statement. And the way we got there, the first way we tried was we right-clicked and we went to select data, and we reordered these series using these 2 buttons right here. But the way I prefer to get there is click on a series and give it an order number that you want. So if I did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, doesn't have to be 9, it could be 5, it's not going to matter. Whoops. 5, change that 9 to a 6. Won't move anything because it's these lines that are in the other order. This would be a 7. This would be an 8. And so while if they were stacking them, the order matters. These other lines that were kind of interspersed through there and now have, I don't know what order they're in. It doesn't matter with the line, it doesn't matter. So now we have kind of our income statement flipped upside down and showed that if we bring in, what was the first number, $551.6 million, the first money off the top goes to cost of goods sold. The next thing we have to pay is overhead and depreciation and so on. And then only if we have money left can we be paying dividends or sending money to the balance sheet in retained earnings. And so if this is helpful for you, now you have a chart. A couple of things to clean up. We still have these blank rows from over here. So I'm going to right click and select the data, find those blank rows, blank series, and remove them. And that cleans up our legend a little bit. And then I could also come in here. I like to put data labels on here. Now if I click on this point, and right click and add data labels, it's going to add data labels to all the points. So I don't want to do that. I'm going to undo that. But if I click on the series and then click one more time on the point, notice this time only that point is selected. None of the others are. So I can right click on it, add a data label, and then whatever shows up, I'm just going to edit it and type sales. And then on this point, click the series, click the data point, right click to add a data label, edit it, and type EBITDA. Nope, that would be wrong, gross profit. And then on the next one, click the series, click the point, right click, add a data label, click once to edit it. This time it's EBITDA. And then after EBITDA comes earnings before interest and taxes. Click the series, click the point, right click, add the data label, click the data label, click once to edit, double click, earnings before interest and taxes. Click the series, click the point, click right click, add the data label, click the data label, edit it. Earnings before taxes. Click the series, click the point, right click, add the data label, click the data label, edit it, net income. And I'll be the first to admit, when I look back over at that income statement, I really wasn't thinking how large, even though we set 60% in our drivers, how big a piece of our revenue goes to COGS and how small these other changes are relative to that first big piece. So here's one way to show some things. Now the last thing I'd like to show is how to clean up this title, this legend a little bit. We don't need legends for places where we've put these labels. So it would be nice if I could come in here to the legend and tell it only certain series, but I don't think I can do that. So I'm going to come into select data. I don't even think I can go to select data and tell it here whether or not I want to show it in the legend. The only way I figured out to do this is to click the legend item, click the legend once, then click the legend item. And if I can get the whole item and hit the delete key, I can delete the legend item one at a time without deleting the series itself. If you delete something and the series goes away, that wasn't good. Undo that. So we can clean this up a bit. And that's another way to show it. Now, depending on how much space you have on your dashboard, you may choose to do something like this. You may choose to show only a few of these if you think they're important. Show some creativity. I don't want to grade the same dashboard 23 times, but we've touched on a lot of different things here that will help you get a little bit of experience making charts. Now let's make a chart for the balance sheet. I'd like to show assets in one column and liabilities and equities in the other column. And the things I'd like to stack on these two columns, one would be cash and accounts receivable. And I need to be sure and pick up everything that adds up to total assets. And I'm not going to mess with these things that are preliminary calculations or subtotals. And then I'm going to come down here and pick up everything that adds up to liabilities. And I can be a little bit judicial about this. I don't think I want to break stock and accumulated retained earnings separately. I'll just do equity for both of them. I don't know why some of those are bold and some are not, so I'll just unbold them all. And for the assets, by the way, I want to do this for the 2020 year, so I'll copy and paste all of these. And then for the liabilities and equities, I'm going to go to the different column, but I'm still going to go to the same year to get the appropriate liabilities and equities. And then one thing I find, and this is a little trick, is to create a chart just on the smallest amount of data that I can. So if I start here and insert, I'm going to want a stacked bar chart for this. If I'll just get the data in there and then see what happens if I try to expand that. Is that going in the right direction? It is. It's going to stack that data for me. I think if I had chosen this data first and done insert stacked column, it didn't give me the right kind of data. So I'd have to go back. You never know what you're going to get with Excel, like a box of chocolates. You go to select data, and maybe sometimes clicking switch row and column will help. In this case, it does. It gives me what I want. But I'm going to back down to one series still because I want to make a couple of adjustments. One adjustment that I want to make is I want all of these series to have X data. So if I click on the series itself and give it X data, remember these are the name of the series, the X data or category labels in this kind of chart, the Y data, and the order of the series. I can adjust those things if I have a single series selected. And once I do, I also need to, I didn't do it. I need to change that category label to right here. Now this probably feels a bit awkward. I just want this data to be plotted. I don't want this data to be plotted yet. I'm going to show you a trick here. If you'll click out in the white space again to get the whole chart so that we can expand it like we did on the income statement chart, we can pull it down and show all these rows, but then also pull it over and show this column. And that column picks up a new category label. So we're plotting a category that looks like this. In fact, let me click on it. We're plotting this category. It's just that the first several categories happen to be blank for L&E, and then the next set of categories happen to be blank for assets. We're tricking it that way for the balance sheet. Lots of times I like to put on the exam, ask you to come down and do that for the cash flow statement. So you might want to see where your cash flows are coming from and then plot them in 3 separate columns. It can be a good exam trick to see if you got the concepts from this one. We do need to add a legend, and we get all these blank rows. It was real fun to drag those things down and quick to add the series to the chart, but it picked up a lot of blank legends. So here, let's right click and go to select data and start removing these blank series. and that will clean up our legend quite a bit. There's still a lot of things on there, so you may choose to do something like other and make it equal to that plus, that would be E59, and then not have other non-current. That might make more sense. That gives us one more series to remove. We could do the same thing here. Other plus E66. So depending on how much you want to lump or split your categories, this is always an option. And now we have an interesting way to look at balance sheet data. We can tell that our assets are made up mostly of cash and of net PP&E, and that our liabilities are made up mostly of inventory, debt and equity. Now, again, you can select a single series, right-click, add data labels, take the data label, and in this case, you don't even have to type it. You can edit the data label, format the data label, turn its value and off. Whoa, don't turn its value off because then you'll lose it. Right-click, format the data label, turn its series name on, or no, its category name, and then turn its value off. And you'll get a label there. You might want to turn the font white on that one so we can see it a little bit better. But then you could play around with some of the larger categories. You may want to add the data labels, but with the smaller ones you may not, because they may just start stacking on top of each other. Be sure and turn the name on before you turn the value off so it doesn't go away. So it turns out I wanted the series name and not the category name for these. But that's a nice way to show some balance sheet data. Think through that. Again, think about how you might apply that to the cash flow statement.